Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This is Taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. I see you're in your New Yorker t-shirt today. Very hip.
Wait, I turned that video off real fast. What a creep. You're just sitting there looking for that brief little glimpse before we went full audio.
No, we're not sitting next to each other today we were the last episode.
No, listen, it'll be a full year until we get to do that again. And I'm already starting to think about where that next set of destination is. We started talking when we were together. I pitched Birmingham. I think Birmingham, Alabama, an interesting destination for us to take on.
It is interesting. We don't have to make any decisions right now.
You're very cagey about this. Are we done with these trips? 2 and you're out?
No. I just don't know. I'm not sold on Birmingham yet.
I pitched Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. I think, the fan base in the red states is growing and growing. We might be able to do a live episode by this time next year. I
really like the trips where there's like a city time and a non-city time, because I do city times all the week.
We could stop in Bismarck. I'm sure there's a skyscraper there and we could stay in it.
Maybe a little boutique.
It goes as high as 5 stories.
Oh my! Well, that is Bismarck's a beautiful town, and isn't that the place where all the presidents are?
No, you're thinking of Rapid City, South Dakota. You're confusing the Dakota.
I would never do that, folks. I would never do that.
Coastal elitism is showing.
These are 2 very different states. One's north and one is south.
In fact, I agree with you. I like this city time plus door time, and especially if it's a national park. And so this is a great challenge to give out to the listeners. If you have an idea for the next place that Ryan and I should visit together, shoot it on over to the email address, which is outofofficepod@gmail.com, or you go to the Instagram at OOO podcast, like ooh podcast, because you want to have your email and your Instagram handle different, to make them a little more distinct. It's not like we have anyone who's in marketing running this show.
But folks could also go to the old Apple podcast and just leave us a 5-star review with ideas.
That's interesting. Pitch via review. I like.
Yeah. In fact, we have a new 5-star review right now, Kiernan. What give us a shout out here.
We do, and what I like about it, it's so timely because it's instantly reviewing the last episode, which was also from our recent trip. This is Mammoth Cave Review by Dominic. And Dominic says, our family visited Mammoth Cave as well this week. We could have been on the same tour as Dominic for all we know, and concur wholeheartedly with your review of the visit. 2 exclamation marks. We stayed at the campground in the national park and would recommend that as well. Also, we drove over to the Nolan Lake to escape the heat one afternoon at the Little Beach State Park there. So a great little tip thrown in there. And Dominic, we appreciate the review. And for anyone else out there who likes Out of Office, wants us to keep going, this is the fuel that goes in our gas tank.
Yeah, leave those 5-star reviews. It helps people discover Out of Office, and leave us tips, leave us episode ideas. I
wish we had a way for people to leave us actual tips.
One day,
the Venmo out there. I know, Ryan, you've been kicked off Venmo for God knows what reason. You're always trying to make me use some app I've never heard of.
Folks know what Zelle is, okay?
It's called Walleto. Just send $1,000 to it. Now, Ryan, before we get to, today we haven't even talked about today's episode. So this is the companion episode to that review. That was the Mammoth Cave piece of our trip. And today we're talking about Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville.
Yeah, that's what I said. Louisville, Kentucky.
You got to lean in like Louisville, like that.
Listen, you're the one who was born below the Mason.
It's true.
Kind of you got the Southerner, I got the Northerner. I'm the Bert, you're the Ernie. This is how we balance each other out. This is how the force stays in balance.
Well, we had a great time in Louisville, and I'm excited to share, some of our experiences with the audience.
Listen, we can't rush right in because I know your mom is probably sitting with her earphones in going, oh my God, they forgot to do the Judy alert. The Judy alert, of course, a new segment we've added to the top of every episode where we hear, Ryan, you're some would call you a hobo. You like to call yourself a nomad, but you have no permanent address. So I just want to know, where did you ride the rail cards this week? Where are you?
Well, I am in Costa Rica in a little town called Monte Verde. And that's in northwestern Costa Rica, and it's known for the cloud forest. So to give folks an idea, sort of as I look out over my balcony here at the hotel, I just see an incredible mountain forest with these clouds covering it. So I'll post a picture to the old Instagram so folks can see, but it's beautiful up here.
At OOO podcast.
Exactly.
And now Costa Rica. So if I remember correctly, you had quite a busy itinerary since we separated 2 weeks ago. So where'd you go? Where did you go from Louisville?
Nashville, I went to Nashville and, had a good time. Got to check out Garth Brooks's new honky tonk. Shout out to that.
As a northerner, I can't even say the word honky tonk. Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't sound right coming out of my mouth.
I had a great time, and Nashville, the food is cool. It's an interesting city. It's got a lot of energy, and that Broadway area with all the honky tonks it's just like popping. It's like sort of like a Times Square for country music fans.
Absolutely, and then from there,
I did the traditional Nashville to San Salvador route,
Very traditional.
Very traditional, yeah.
And so this was your week-long vacation in El Salvador.
Yeah, we were, me and friend of the pod, Chase Whiteside, we were in San Salvador.
Well, acquaintance of the pod.
We were in El Salvador, which was super interesting. There definitely will be a podcast on that in the future. And then we flew over here to Costa Rica right after. So
that's great. So you did enough to get a full podcast episode for San Salvador.
Here's what happened. We had historic rains and flooding were happening in El Salvador, so we didn't get to do some of like the things you have to do, like really the volcano and this Mayan archaeological site. And then, but it's not just the rain. Like we had planned like this Sunday where we were going to do all this stuff. We had the final day, we had this incredible itinerary. And then Saturday night, we went out to this club called Living, and we were there till 5 a.m. And then we just never did anything the next day. So
you went for a week to San Salvador, and you're telling me you might not have enough experience in San Salvador, which you're saying doesn't have that much to do. No, but even the stuff there was to do, you didn't do it.
Well, we went up to this little mountain town too for 2 nights. So we weren't in San Salvador the whole time, but yeah, it was a reason to go back. I can talk a lot about the club Living, but I don't think the audience would be that excited.
And the reason you're giving for a week there with no experience to share is rain and a really sort of epic hangover, historic flooding, historic hangover. This Costa Rican cloud forest doesn't have rain, does it?
It only rains here. Yeah, the climate is broken. This is what's happened.
I think you might be broken. Well, thank goodness it did not rain while we were in Louisville. So no. Ryan, I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan, let's close our eyes and take ourselves back 2 weeks. We're fresh off the plane. We haven't seen each other in a while. We're so excited because we get to explore Louisville, Kentucky, the pride of Kentucky.
Yeah, this is the largest city in Kentucky. It's got about 600,000 folks. It's famous for things like the Kentucky Derby, the Bourbon Trail, and it has, I think quite a bit to do. We're gonna go into some of that today. But we had a really packed itineraries. You did not let me have a hangover day, Kiernan, in this Louisville trip.
No, I said I'm going to pick you up at 8 a.m. But I did bring you a breakfast sandwich. We'll go into where I got that from. and then we were immediately on the road. We actually, we immediately left. We both stayed in Louisville one night, got a rental car, went out to Mammoth, and came back so that we had full 3 days just to explore the city.
Yeah, I feel like we got a really good view of the city. I had been to the city once before, but only at like kind of a conference visit. So I feel like we really got to explore, which was great.
I would recommend for anyone who's like planning a visit. I do think that you could do a long weekend and see a lot of what Louisville has to offer. I mean, the truth is there were food places and bars we didn't have time for because you only have so many meals when you're going for a short amount of time. But it did feel like a city that you could definitely get to know quickly.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely on the food and drink side, stuff that we didn't get to do. But as we like to say, reason to go back. But we did get a lot of stuff in. So do we want to start with the fancy hotel you stayed in that night I was at the Days Inn?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you were showing up at like midnight. So there were basically two hotels that were like fully on my radar. There was a third that we didn't stay in that I'll also mention. So I stayed first in the Brown Hotel, and the Brown Hotel is kind of the most famous historic hotel in town. So in the early 20th century, the Brown Hotel was the place to be. And it definitely still has that ambiance. Of course, there are stories about being haunted and all these things, but it's very luxurious, but sort of worn down and in the way of a lot of these classic. So really fancy chandeliers, really ornate carpets, and kind of over the top murals, furniture and pianos. So it feels like it used to be ritzy, but like now it has tourists who are in like Tevas and shorts.
Yeah, and I got a chance to see the lobby because you left your headphones or something there. So we went back.
Sadly, exactly. And we were able to go in, and a lot
of bronze horses and stuff in the lobby.
You're right about the decor being very horse centric.
They love horses in Louisville.
They do love him, and it's of course because of the Kentucky Derby being kind of the primary thing that one has to do in Louisville each year. And so, yes, there's a lot of paintings of horses, there's sculptures of horses, and there's an iconic dish that the Brown Hotel makes that's very famous.
And
everybody says you have to have it.
Delicious.
It's called the Hot Brown.
That sounds like something that might happen after you have some really bad Mexican food in Cave City.
Okay, all right. Let's come on. And I'll say, I actually never said it aloud before, except when I ordered it, and I'm a little embarrassed now. So I had a dinner free before you joined me, and I decided. So I have to admit, I had pause about going down to get this, but both because of kind of the aged like feel of the hotel, but also because it just didn't sound that appetizing to me. So it's a quintessential dish of Louisville, and it's basically they describe it as an open-faced turkey sandwich with bacon and a delicate Mornay sauce, like a thick, creamy sauce that they really glop onto.
And there's no cheese?
And then they melt cheese on top of that. And then there's various spices and herbs. And again, I'm okay with heavy food. I don't mind. Give me a good German, Polish restaurant. I'm all on board. But I got to say, the Hot Brown, I give a real thumbs down. It did not please me at all. It was extremely heavy and off-putting. I think cream sauces are just really not for me. And I don't think they really go with the turkey and the cheese. And it's like not... To say it's an open-faced turkey sandwich, it's like buried under a mound of cream and cheese. I really don't think you would have liked it, Ryan.
I mean, it sounds like something I would like, and I wonder if there's better versions of it in Louisville. I know that
I did a little research on that, and from everything I can tell, the Brown Hotel is the place to get them. So I don't believe that there is a better version out there.
Well, that's a challenge to the Louisville chefs listening. Reinvent the Brown.
I just think, we're going to talk about some of the better restaurants we went to. And frankly, I just think this is food of a different era. It's like when you read 1950s recipes and they're talking about salads made of Jell-O, like the hot brown. It's just of a different time. In the 1920s, dressed up in tuxes, going out dancing and watching the horse races. Maybe you just really wanted to be loaded down with cream and cheese.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, that's it's still on my list. I want to give the hot brown a chance at some point. But the second hotel, Kiernan, that we ended up both staying at in separate rooms, Catherine,
separate floors,
and locks. we asked to be placed very far away on separate ends of the hotel. It was the 21C Museum Hotel, and this is a really unique hotel.
I have become obsessed with this hotel brand. I wasn't familiar with it before. I knew that there were a few across mostly southern and Midwestern cities, the 21C Museum Hotels. And as the name says, Museum Hotel, it's a hotel that has a 24-hour art museum directly inside of it, a contemporary modern art museum.
And it's not like one room with like 6 pieces. It's like 6 or 7 rooms with a lot of pieces and a diverse set of artists. Like, it's legit.
Super fun. A bunch of artists that neither of us had heard of, but we both liked the art. There's some pop inflected art. There's a mix of sculpture and painting. There was a whole room that had this kind of neon wild wallpaper all around it, and the room was dark, but it had like an ultraviolet light on it. It was very, not an ultraviolet. What do they call it? A black light.
Black
light on it. So it's
very Instagrammable.
It was very, very cool. Also, Ryan, have you transitioned to inside a sewage pipe? Is that where we're now recording?
That is literally a torrential downpour that is happening right now.
Are you back in San Salvador?
No, I'm in
not to go out.
I'm in Costa Rica. It is incredible. The rain is. I can't see anything out the window.
It literally sounds like the sound effect from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when they had meetings down in the sewers.
Well, it is the opposite of sewer. It's beautiful rainforest rain, but it is loud. Sorry.
Put it up on the Instagram.
I will.
It sounds very peaceful. So the 21C Museum Hotels. What's also fun is that it's a part of the brand. Their trademark is this giant plastic. These giant plastic colorful penguins in each of their locations. I think they have 8 hotels. One penguin color is their signature. And so for ours, for the Louisville, which is the kind of premier 21C hotel, it was the red penguin. And what I learned was they move these penguin sculptures, which are big. They're like 3-4 feet. They move them all around the hotel during the day. So you never know when you're going to turn a corner and run into a penguin, which I really liked. It's very
whimsical. Assume that they're moving them. We didn't see anyone move them.
So maybe some of the ghosts from the Brown Hotel get over there and move them around. Really, really nice, modern, luxurious rooms. I think we both found them super comfortable. Very attentive staff who are more than happy to engage and give you tips and tricks on Louisville. Clearly, a lot of hometown pride. Also, pretty knowledgeable about the art, and it also has a great hotel restaurant called Proof, which we'll also talk about.
And in front of it, there is a massive David sculpture in gold.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's the David, but it's gold, and it's a little lumpier than the real David.
It's not like the best David reproduction you're going to see, but it is. It exists, and it's there, and it's quite large, and it's different than other things on that main stretch of road there in downtown Louisville.
I mean, more times than I care to mention, I caught Ryan just kind of outside glancing up longingly at the Golden David. Okay, Ryan, come on in. It's time to go on we got to get to the Louisville Slugger Museum.
It was distracting.
Yeah, very distracting. But I'm super fascinated by this concept of a museum hotel, because what's cool is the museum part is open for 24 hours a day. So if you're out, you've done the Bourbon Trail and you're feeling a little tipsy, you've got a great place that you can go and outside guests can come in and tour. And I've actually reached out. I think I may talk to the head of the 21 Museum Hotel chain to talk about this concept. And I just think, what really struck me was so many places are trying to make like Instagrammable moments within their hotels or their tourist spot. But the 21C Museum Hotel comes by that very, very authentically because they've got genuine, really interesting art.
Yeah, they lean all the way into it. It's not like a hotel and it's on the side there's a museum. Your room has art in it. The elevators have art. It is. You feel it's a very cool experience.
Indeed. So, Ryan, I would say so. We would recommend both of those hotels. I don't want to speak for you, but I assume you feel the same.
I would definitely recommend the 21C. I didn't stay in the Brown, but it looked cool, kind of like the old school Gilded Age kind of thing that I like. So, yeah.
And then there's one more hotel that I'll plug that we didn't stay in, but gets very well reviewed. I did just take a quick glance in it, and I thought it looked very pleasant. The Hotel Genevieve. And if I had to compare this to a more well-known group of hotels, it reminded me of the Ace Hotel. Very modern, cool, hipster. It's got a rooftop bar, super nice rooms, and it's in a part of town that has a little bit more going on as far as like the bar scene, the late night scene.
Yeah, that's a very exciting road. We'll talk about that a little later on in the pod.
And of course, the main reason I regret not staying there is it's named for Saint Genevieve.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of saints sort of bopping around Louisville, right? Yeah,
it's why we felt so at home.
Definitely.
So, Ryan, I thought now we could transition to talking about some of the major sites and things to do in Louisville.
Yeah, let's do it. Why don't we start with sort of the things about town?
So the first is we did an architecture tour, which is led by a group called the Louisville Historic Tours, and we specifically did the architecture tour where you take a walk around the historic district that's near their Central Park, Louisville Central Park, and it's significant. It was about an hour and a half walk through the neighborhood. It moves quite briskly, and you get pretty into the details of all the different architectural styles represented there.
Yeah, I was impressed with how dense the tour was. Like, it wasn't like a handful of buildings. Like, there was a lot to see, and our guide, clearly knew a lot about the area. So I had a great time on that tour.
He was eccentric but knowledgeable.
Yes, he did do a really funny thing where he stood in front of a house and described it, and then realized a minute later that he described a different house.
The house right next door, yeah. And of course, we the little group of six of us who's so foolish just kept looking at the house going, oh, yes, Baroque. Oh, yes, I see the mix of styles he's referencing. He's like, oh, actually, that was the next house over. Oh, yes, of course.
Yes, so super cool. Some of the things I really enjoyed seeing were they have these shotgun houses similar to what you would see in NOLA. They've got...
are we saying NOLA here on the podcast?
We're hip now? In New Orleans.
Yes.
They've got those shotgun houses.
And the shotgun house, for anyone who doesn't know, these are these straight rectangle houses all on one floor. And they're called shotgun houses because people said if you shot a shotgun into the front, it would go straight out the back because it's rooms that lead into one another just directly through, almost like a tunnel.
Exactly. And they've got some of these houses that Sears used to sell in their catalog that people constructed in the early 1900s. But
yeah, and they look pretty great.
They look great. Yeah. I mean, some of the houses are really beautiful. There's this one house, this pink house that has a fantastic history.
Oh, yes.
First as a brothel.
Not a good Catholic spot.
No, it was a brothel, and then it became the Women's Temperance Society during Prohibition. And Prohibition not hugely popular in Louisville because it's a bourbon town, but they wanted to make it not look like a bordello anymore, so they painted it pink. And I just think that makes it look more like
a brothel. Yeah.
Yeah, more like a brothel, right? But that's what, now anybody who owns that house, it stays pink, and it's a beautiful house. And I'll definitely post a picture on the Instagram.
Yeah. And what I would say one of the themes that came across on the tour was that there's just such an eclectic mix of styles. The reasoning he was given was that, or the reason he explained to us was that many of the architects in Louisville, they simply weren't as stuck up and rigid about the rules around different types of styles and houses. So they would mix them much more freely than kind of the more uptight New England. He was referencing New England and New York architects who would kind of look down their noses at the creative styling that you see.
Yeah, exactly. They did a little more, everything with a little much for the New York architects. And
a little bit of it is a little garish, I would say.
Oh, but I thought what was really cool, and I haven't really seen before, were these little private walkway streets where you sort of go away from the street and you walk down a very fancy, it's not an alley, but how do you describe it? It's like a private walkway where no cars can go, but the houses sort of are facing each other. And it's sort of like your house is out of like a little park, like a little pedestrian park. It's a really unique way to design a neighborhood.
Yeah, I was totally with you where it just seems like such a cool idea for urban planning. So it's basically, if you have roadways, these boulevards, you would have sidewalks in between them, and the houses would face each other across the sidewalks with no street across. So you can't, these houses don't have driveways. They don't have cars readily accessible, but they're completely protected from pedestrians out on the boulevards and the cars and traffic. So you get this bucolic sort of gardeny feel, and it just feels very private and romantic and beautiful. I mean, and they clearly take great pride in the upkeep of these spaces, which are, like you say, kind of these pocket parks in neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I was really surprised in the tour when he opened the gate and said that this was a public public walkway, because it does feel like it's very private. It has that feel. Totally cool, really beautiful. Something that I wish more urban designers had considered.
And another thing about these like more classic older houses that we were able to see is, I think everybody has a moment when you're enjoying traveling to a place that you think, well, maybe I could live here. And so I did ask, hey, like, what are these giant old houses? I'm talking like giant. We're talking like 20 plus rooms in each of these.
Yeah,
places.
these are like mansions.
Yeah. What does one of these go for on the market? He said, oh, well, I know that one over there went for $700,000 recently. It's like, $700,000. That's like a studio apartment in Boston.
Yeah, the New Yorkers and the Philly folks on the tour were like, "Whoa!" when they said that.
Yes, and then those who weren't from those places looked at us in a judgmental way. Yeah,
it's true. Another house that you see, which I thought was kind of cool, was a house that Tom Cruise lived in when he was a teenager. He briefly lived in Louisville and did some theater at the local high school. And his family owned a house down there in old Louisville. So a lot of characters you will be introduced to on the tour. And I think we really recommend this tour.
Absolutely. It was a great use of time, a great way to stretch your legs and learn quite a bit from a local.
And then, Kiernan, one of the houses that we walked past, you and I both got a chance to explore. And this is the Conrad Caldwell house. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is, if one house is going to really catch your eye in Louisville, it's this one. It's this crazy over the top kind of castle looking Romanesque mansion that is, it just soars over the neighborhood, and it's right on this big corner lot across from that Central Park that's right there. And it basically, it's called the Conrad Caldwell House after the original owner. So Conrad, the family that built it, made their fortune in tanning. And then the next family that took it over was named Caldwell. and they made their fortune in water towers, which, I always love when you hear like where the family fortune came from. And, it's something like water towers. But the water tower business was a good one based on this mansion. And the Conrad Caldwell house sits on land that was originally set aside within Louisville and really put Louisville on the map for something called the Southern Exposition. And it was kind of like a World's Fair vibe, specifically focused on the South. They did it for 5 years from 1883 to 1887, right on this land. And the neighborhood today is called Old Louisville. And then once the bigger expositions took hold, like the Chicago one in 1893, which is pretty famous, the Southern Expositions wound down, and then they sold off this land, which then went to the Conrad family, and this became their house.
Yeah, and it's a gorgeous house, and a lot of interesting people lived in it, and it has a major connection to Louisville, though, in this world's largest bat. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the family that made water towers, the Caldwells, they have they have the pictures on display inside the house of all the famous water towers that they've made. For example, we may remember from our youth, if you ever went to Disney World, at MGM Studios, they had a water tower with Mickey ears on top of it. That was fabricated by the Caldwells. So this water tower operation is still going. And yes, they created the world's largest baseball bat, which is out in front of the Louisville Slugger Museum, because the city had a rule that anything that stood that high had to be functional. It couldn't be purely ornamental. And so when they were looking to install that bat, the Louisville Sluggers looked to the Caldwell family, and they actually ran plumbing through the bat so that it was operational.
Yeah, and I feel like they've done away with that rule, because there's no way that David is functional. It's barely aesthetic.
You would be the one to know. You were studying every inch of that thing. So the bat stands 128 feet tall, and it weighs 68,000 pounds. So Conrad Caldwell House, really nice place to visit. Gives you a good sense of the history of Louisville more broadly. There were docents there who were very well written on the history, including a descendant of the Conrad family. So it's still a family affair.
There's always a descendant in a historic house, so that's one of the rules.
Right. That's right.
Another really cool thing about Louisville is that there is a massive park system designed by Frederick Olmsted, who we've talked a lot about on the podcast. I think we have actually 2 episodes dedicated to him, so we'll throw those in the show notes.
At least you were on a real kick, Olmsted kick. And in fact, the Central Park that I've referenced a couple of times that's in Old Louisville, that was one of the smaller parks that Olmsted also designed there.
Yeah, he designed a 26-mile system that they built through the from 1890s to the 1930s, and they've done. I think that they're doing an okay job keeping it up. I know they have like a nonprofit dedicated to it. It's a lot of park space for a city of Louisville's size, and we actually went to the summit of one of the parks.
Yeah. So as you say, it's a series of many parks. It's kind of like in Boston, the Emerald Necklace of connected parks. And there are 3 that are sort of the big showpieces: the Cherokee Park, Iroquois Park, and Swanee Park. And we visited the Iroquois Park and went to the summit. The Iroquois Park, as we learned, is a little bit far from downtown. I mean, nothing's horribly far, but we had to hop an Uber there, and it drops you off, and it's a little bit of a wilder park. And that's because at the center of it is a 10,000-year-old forest that Olmsted kept intact. And sure enough, Ryan, we were pretty intrepid. We headed right in there. We had no idea where we were going, but you were with a Boy Scout, so I feel like you knew you were in good hands. Yeah,
we were able to get up. It was a pretty steep climb up to the top there, and you could see quite a bit of the city. I wish, honestly, they had sort of trimmed some of the trees on top a little bit, so you had a better view. But
yes, it's meant to give you a good view back onto Louisville, which as you say, it's kind of hard. You can get elevated on this little wall that they have there. You can stand up on it, but yeah, you don't get a super great view, and you are rather far away. But it's good exercise. Definitely.
And it's cool to see. Now it is quite a bit of a drive. Like, we were surprised, I think, how far away it was in the Uber from the sort of Louisville that we were staying in. So I
was just surprised that you chose, what's the furthest park we could visit?
That was supposed to be the most homesteady, if that's a term, the most homesteady of the park. So that's why I picked it. It wasn't, random.
And then as we were coming down on the trail, we somehow took a wrong turn. We ended up on a golf course that's also in the park.
And we had to dodge golf balls.
Just walk right through a fairway.
Yeah, there were these folks playing golf who were smoking a lot of marijuana.
Yeah, they didn't care too much.
No, they weren't. They barely noticed. Another cool thing that we saw, not designed by Olmsted, but is the Cave Hill Cemetery. And there was a very specific reason, Kiernan, you wanted to check out this cemetery.
Absolutely. So, well, first, I feel like it's becoming a bit of a theme. When we were in Richmond, we visited an old, beautiful cemetery as well. And it was, it's one of these great kind of classic cemeteries that they're enjoyable as a park as well. It's really bucolic and beautiful, and with long trails and, kind of flowing acreage. But there was one particular grave that I was very hot on getting to, which is, when you're in Kentucky, you're trying some fried chicken. The man himself, Colonel Harlan Sanders, is buried at the Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, and we went to his grave.
Yes, we did. And it's, he's got his bust there, and he's buried next to his wife. And, it's a beautiful cemetery. It's a great place to walk around and see a lot of interesting graves.
And the colonel looks great. He's got that bust. He's exactly what you think he was. He looks like he's very happy. And Ryan, as a fast food magnate myself, I really felt drawn to this. I'm thinking this might be a good model for my grave.
I absolutely, except it would be yours would be more hummus and falafel forward. I think.
Exactly. And I think you and I were both surprised, genuinely surprised. I did think that there would be devotees who would leave kind of buckets there. And there was a single ketchup packet that was left on the back of the bust, but nothing else to call attention to it. There's no chicken.
No, there's no chicken.
And then right around the corner from him, there were some locals there who said, well, you got to go and see the magician.
Yeah, no, this was funny because actually, until we did our research after this, I didn't know, but Mr. Magic is also sort of fast food connected. He was an employee of the Frito-Lay organization and became the official magician of the Frito-Lay organization. Now, a lot of organizations these days, I don't even think they have that. The chief magic officer,
the chief magician.
Yeah.
That sounds like a title you'd somehow can't do any magic. I've been named chief magic operating officer.
Yeah.
So Mr. Magic, his grave is a full statue of him and his magician regalia, and it was it was pretty fun, and it's a whole nice inscription about magic and the joy children take in it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, probably one of the most famous favorite sons of Louisville is the boxer Muhammad Ali, who has a beautiful grave as well in the cemetery. And we didn't go to it because you and I are not big boxing fans, but there's also a museum dedicated to him and his career, in town as well. So if you're a Muhammad Ali fan, there's a lot for you to see there outside of his grave.
Yes, but we did go to the grave, and there's not a ton to see at that one particularly. But, you're already there for the colonel. You should go see Muhammad Ali.
Definitely. And then we did something that I thought was more fun than I had thought it was going to be.
Yes, and this was a little bit of a tough debate between us because we had an afternoon where we could either fit in a ride on a riverboat called the Belle of Louisville, or we could go across the bridge into Indiana, where you can visit a river museum all about the culture of steamboats and how they were built. And you know me, I'm a quirky museum guy. I advocated for the museum, but you got to make the final call on this one. And I'm super happy you did, because we had a great time on the Belle of Louisville riverboat.
Yeah, this is a 1914 steamboat. It's one of the only remaining authentic steamboats from that era. It's a historic landmark. And it's a beautiful
boat. It's not one of, it's the only.
Yeah.
That's what I think is so cool about it. It is the only authentic steamboat that is still out there running.
And when we walked up to it, there was incredibly loud music, and tell us why that was.
Yeah. So on top of the roof of the steamboat, which is a big classic American steamboat, it's like exactly what you picture when I say steamboat. It's got the 19-foot paddles on the back. And that is true today. That is its real propulsion from a steam engine. And that steam is also used to power what's called a calliope. And if you don't know a calliope, it's like a type of organ. They have 32 pipes on the roof of the Belle of Louisville. And the calliope used to be associated with steamboats because, before cell phones and all and modern communication, you would hear the calliope and you would know a new steamboat was coming into town.
And boy, is it loud, but
it's very loud, but it's joyful.
Yeah. And it doesn't go on during the actual trip. The actual trip is actually pretty calm. There's a little bar, and you can eat really bad tacos if you want, but there's a little bar, and you can sit, and you get to sort of go down the river there and see both sides of Indiana and Kentucky. It was super cool. So I'm so glad that we did that.
Absolutely. And then the bottom floor has some museum exhibits about the historic ship. So it teaches you a bit about how steamboats work. Steam goes and then it turns the paddle. Spoiler alert, but that's the general idea. And yeah, just very calm, fun to just take a cruise down the river. And, it filled a good 2 hours for us that Sunday afternoon, a nice calm Sunday.
Exactly. And, we did get quite a few museums in, though. I don't want folks to think that we skip museums, because we had a good, I think, a handful of museums that we checked out, including the Louisville Slugger Museum.
That's right. Now, if there's one thing that I would say you got to do when you go to Louisville, you got to go to the Slugger Museum. It's a quick museum. You can be in and out in 45 minutes. And they run them. It's a super professional tour through the where Louisville Sluggers are made, which is, of course, the famous baseball bat. And what I learned was that they supply Louisville Slugger, the company supplies 80% of Major League Baseball bats. So these are, they're so closely associated with the sport, like a baseball museum, and they have a great area. But you should show up before your time for the factory tour, because you get to see a whole bunch of historic bats used by great baseball players. There was a Babe Ruth bat where when he had his greatest hitting streak, he was putting tick marks into the wood of the bat around the Louisville Slugger logo. And I'll put that picture up on the Instagram. I loved that story.
Yeah, there's a lot of his baseball history in the museum. And then the factory tour itself, I mean, it's a real factory where they're currently making Louisville Sluggers for some of the greatest baseball players that you and I have never heard of. But
I'm married to a baseball fan. I've heard
totally.
of them.
Yeah. Roger Clemens. I mean, some people like that.
Or is it Clem Rogerson? I always forget.
I mean, when you walked in, the thing that really hit me was just the smell of the wood, and they use for depending on the type of bat, either a maple, an ash, a birch wood. So it just smells incredible in there.
Yeah, one of the things that our guide tossed off, I don't know if you caught this, she mentioned that birch wood gets harder over time. Like as you use it and hit more balls with it, it gets harder. And I looked it up, and sure enough, basically the grains of that particular wood get more compact over time. So you get a harder bat in the end. And so while the others are more likely to break, not so maple. I thought that was a really interesting little fact.
Yeah, and some of the machinery is really wild. Like seeing them basically take a log and turn it into this billet, and then the billet becomes a bat. I mean, these machines are incredible.
and they work so fast. And then once the sort of automated lathe creates the bat, then it gets handed off to actually, you can see humans who are actually staining them and preparing them. And many of these bats for the major league are made to very specific specifications for individual players.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a famous player, you get to go and they measure you for a bat and you get exactly what you want.
I also learned that there are like Louisville Slugger bat obsessives who collect all different sorts of bats. They were measuring bats that they put out once a year, and you can get all different designs. There's a whole collecting culture.
Yeah, it's like sneakerheads, but they're bat heads, I guess. And then they give you a cool thing to take home, a little mini bat.
Exactly. And Ryan, you were kind enough to give me yours, and I did bring them back here to the children, Charlotte and Penelope, and they immediately started hitting each other with them. So I had to take them away within like 1 minute of getting home.
Until they're a little older, I think that those are going to be for the shelf. And then,
Just two more facts about Louisville Slugger that I loved was the shavings from the wood go to a local turkey farm. So it's all very sustainable. And they do show you the actual forest where they take the wood from, and they replant and have, a good system going to keep the forest intact. And they still use, to move the bats around the factory floor, these 100-year-old carts that have this giant wheel in the middle. It was like a brilliant design. And, they really made things to last 100 years ago, and they're still carting them around. It's amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. So I think, of the museums that we went to, that's like the number one museum factory tour to do in Louisville. We went to a history museum, the Fraser International History Museum. Now, it's not very international, unless you consider Kentucky and the various areas in Kentucky to be international.
Yeah, it seems to me. So it reminds me of the Texas Museum in Austin, where it's a lot of kind of hometown pride and a lot of history specifically about Texas. It sounds. I remember when we were checking in, I was talking to the guide about how the name of the museum had changed 2 or 3 times. And he did confirm it seemed it looked really refurbished and very focused on Kentucky culture, which was great. I would recommend it. When I'm there, I want to learn that sort of stuff. And so great exhibits about how do you make bourbon. There was an interesting little exhibit about different packaging and marketing around bourbon that I think you and I both found really surprisingly interesting, because it was kind of that Mad Men era of advertising.
The bottles were super cool. Yeah, the bottles, historic
they would come out with special sculpted bottles every holiday, and then after the holiday, they would sell a kit to turn the bourbon bottle into a lamp in your house.
Yeah, so we didn't do like a bourbon tour on this trip. But we got
some bourbon.
We drank some bourbon, but that was it was great to sort of see that and get an understanding of the bourbon making process. And they also do bourbon tastings at the museum as well. So if that's something that you want to do, that's available. And then I think that in terms of some of the collection, it could have been a little, like I love miniatures, and there was a miniature collection, but a lot of it was kind of strange. Like a lot of the soldiers had like fallen down and everything. Like it looked like there had been an earthquake in the miniature collection.
Maybe that was what they were going for, Ryan. Yeah. And then there's nice profiles all around the museum of famous Kentuckians. Then there's like these quirkier collections. There's quite a big armor collection there. So it's a little bit of a grab bag, but I like museums like that. And again, I did think it was super clean, super well curated and bright.
Definitely.
Was not crowded at all. We actually saw a wedding getting ready to come in. But yeah, I'd recommend it if you have a free hour.
Yeah, definitely. And it's right there on the main stretch, so you don't have to go far.
Also, a gift shop full of local good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of museum gift shops for souvenirs and gifts, because it's like you can always find weird stuff that you can't find other places in the city.
And then, Ryan, you on a previous visit to Louisville had taken in the Speed Art Museum.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the Speed Art Museum. We didn't go on this trip, but it is a sizable museum for the city. It's got a classic, European collection and international art collection. And it's named after not speed like NASCAR, but this family, the Speeds, who are well represented throughout. You're going to hear about them throughout your travels in Louisville. And Joshua Speed is the Joshua Speed who was incredibly close to President Lincoln. So, this family goes way back in Kentucky. Obviously, Lincoln, we're going to talk a bit about, he goes way back in Kentucky. And so, if you're a fan of contemporary art, you want a couple hours sort of seeing some interesting stuff, the Speed Art Museum has a pretty big collection, and it's definitely worth your time. So, Kiernan, we didn't just go to museums and go on steamboats. We ate and drank quite a bit because Louisville is a city where you can do that. We had our final dinner at Proof, which was the very cool restaurant in the 21C Museum Hotel. A ton of cool art. We had breakfast and dinner there. I think we really liked that restaurant.
Yeah, it was great. And it's one of the better restaurants around. They a local sourcing. It's a pretty standard menu of kind of American classics, but we both had some pretty good meals there. I had a great biscuit breakfast sandwich the morning that we were leaving, and the art theme continues through it. They've got a very quirky, bright, colorful style within that we found really friendly, and they were closing down as we were still sitting there drinking, but not rushing us out the door. It was really hospitable and wonderful, and
a great place to drink. Some of the local bourbon. They've got a great bourbon list, and so that's a good way to do it. We went to this bar called the Silver Dollar, which is on the world's best cocktail bar list. I was shocked. It wasn't very crowded.
No, it was weird how quiet it was. I mean, it was like a
weekend.
Yeah, that's right. It was a weekend. Yeah. Very strange. It was a Saturday night.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of an earlier place because they have like some, home style food and comfort food kind of going on. But the cocktails were great, and it's a cool atmosphere. And it was in a neighborhood that we didn't spend a lot of time in. It was in sort of like a hipstery neighborhood, like 10, 15 minutes out of Main Street.
Yes. Yeah. It was very cool, very chill, good, fun music. They were playing real vinyl there. They love engaging and talking about the cocktails, and have a good set of really creative cocktails that we enjoyed a few of.
Yeah. And then another bar that we actually went to on a recommendation in our on the old Apple podcast reviews from Bad Chad 1 was a place called Garage Bar, and it was super happening. It's an old garage converted into a bar, but you also got the whole outside, so it's sort of like an inside outside space, or people playing games and hacky sack, and just a bunch of super diverse crowd, like college kids all the way up to grandparents, like doing a nightcap after they go to dinner. I thought that was a really good time, and I did the gin and tonic, and it had a ton of energy, that whole street.
Yeah, super great. Like if you wanted to do a little bar crawl, you could definitely entertain yourselves. As you say, I think it's a little bit of an earlier town. So like I'd recommend starting out drinking at, 8 or 9 if you want to hit a bunch of places. But I was very impressed, like you were saying, super like inclusive crowd. There were people who were clearly college students all the way to like middle-aged and older. I mean, sadly, that's us at this point.
Yeah, we were worried we would be the oldest people there, but we were not. Like it was everybody was there.
No, and we were, of course, the best looking.
Do you want to talk a bit about 610 Magnolia, which I think was sort of the food highlight for us?
Yes, this was the highest end place that we took in. This was the hardest to book. You have to call, you have to leave a message, you have to hope they call you back because they won't let you know if they don't have a reservation. But really, they were super friendly and got back in touch. It's a chef named Edward Lee, and we did basically a tasting menu where you make a couple choices along the way, but everything is it's really fine dining, super specific, incredible creative plates, lots of focus on local sourcing, and a little bit. I mean, it's not like a fried chicken place. It's a lot of delicate flavors, sophisticated palates. But we both thought it was lovely and very knowledgeable staff.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was expecting a little more of like that elevated new Southern cuisine, that came out of Nashville. But it definitely has a lot of like Asian influences, and it's an interesting menu. Like it'll surprise you.
And Ryan, before you came in, I hit up a restaurant called Chicken Me, CHIKN and Me, MI. And this is, I'm sorry, Chicken Me, CHIKNMI, Chicken Me. And this was rated one of Eater's best fried chickens in the U.S. recommendations. And what's cool about it is it's like they have a fried chicken sandwich with an Asian twist. And so it's a fried chicken thigh that they do in a rice and tapioca flour, a brioche bun with kimchi slaw, black garlic aioli, and pickled cucumbers. So it's like, you get the heaviness and richness of the chicken with this kind of bright peppery flavor, and it really uplifts the whole thing. It was a great sandwich.
I am jealous because I love fried chicken almost more than anything. So I'll have to go check that out next time I'm in town. And and I just want to give a shout out to the place that you brought me an excellent breakfast sandwich from on our very first day. And that's the Butchertown Grocery Bakery. And I have to say the bacon, egg, and cheese with the aioli. I don't love aioli, but it wasn't like overwhelmingly aioli. So I thought it was a great sandwich, and the coffee was great. So folks looking to kind of get a little breakfast on the go in the morning, I think that's a great spot.
And particularly the biscuit was very high quality.
Yeah. It's a real biscuit.
I had a sausage with pepper jelly breakfast sandwich also really stand out.
Yeah, that was a cool place.
Just two other places, Ryan, that I'd call out. One is I stopped and got us beers for Mammoth Cave at Mile Wide Brewery. Really nice local brewery, wide selections of types of beer. Cool place to hang out, clearly. And then there's a place that I would put more on like the attractions list called Muth's Candies, MUTHS. And there I got a candy that Louisville is very proud of. And it's called the Modjeska, Modjeska. And what it is it's a house-made marshmallow covered in a butter and cream caramel. And, my review is it was fine. It was fine. The caramel was very good, but I'm not a marshmallow guy. So, it's famous. I'm glad I tried it. The hot brown, I was not too happy I tried. A Modjeska, sure, pick it up. It's good.
And I think that's just a taste of what Louisville has to offer, especially on a food and drink side. Obviously, the bourbon trail is a big thing, and there are a lot of other sort of interesting restaurants to check out. So, I hope that this gives folks a reason to go spend a long weekend in Louisville. And, Kiernan, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment because it's when we come together as a group. I like to think even, dare I say, a family, and we share as a community. So we're a group, a family, and a community. And you and I each bring one thing to pass around. It could be a story, it could be a souvenir, it could be a tale, it could be a lie that you're just passing off very convincingly. But it must meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you this episode, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kiernan. A very cool ad went a little viral today on X from the Oslo Advertising Tourism Board. And it's a really funny ad because instead of sort of like singing Oslo's praises, it's sort of like it sort of downplays everything in a really comical way. So it's like, unlike New York and Paris, you can walk the entire city in 10 minutes, and you can go to a museum and not have to wait an hour to see something that's almost as good as the Mona Lisa. And I just thought it's a really clever ad. It made me want to go to Oslo, like I think the only Scandinavian capital that I haven't been to. And I just appreciated the sort of cheekiness of the ad and the willingness of the city to sort of poke fun of itself while showing off why it's a beautiful, unique town to visit. So link in the show notes for that. A very clever ad, and made me want to go to Oslo.
Oslo has actually been on my list, but man, it is an expensive place to visit.
I bet, but it's it's small at least.
I'll see if this ad convinces me.
Kiernan, did you manage to bring a last stop this week?
I sure did. So Catherine and I are considering some destinations for the family, maybe early fallish. So I'm getting back into planning mode, and I'm in the kind of broad exploration phase. And she had an idea. There was a Bon Appetit article that kind of stuck in her head about this area that I have never heard of in southwestern Michigan called Harbor Country. And Harbor Country is basically a series of 8 towns in southwestern Michigan, all along Lake Michigan. And as I read about it, I was like kind of shocked that this doesn't seem to be more touristed. It's an hour and a half out of Chicago. It's 3 hours from Detroit by car. And it's this super charming beach area, but also close to all this local produce and farms and handicrafts and goods. And it looks super, friendly and laid back. And you can like have great afternoons on the lake and get great food nearby. And it's apparently become quite an escape for people from those cities. I'm seriously considering this as maybe a good destination for us.
I've always wanted to go to Lake Michigan. I know people who love it. This looks like a really cool place I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, the anchor town there is called New Buffalo. And, I was Googling around, looking at some images from it. And hey, if anyone out there has any tips, I'd love to read them outofofficepod@gmail.com, because this one is a real contender. It looks very, very good for especially bringing a couple of kids. Yeah, no, the good last stop, Kiernan.
You know what we are talking about on the next episode? I'm going to sit down with Kiernan Schmidt, who is you, and talk about...
Wait, published author Kiernan Schmidt?
Published author Kiernan Schmidt. And you have written, I think, the definitive guide to Boston.
Thank you. Yes, I've written a book that I've talked about on the show before called Secret Boston. And Ryan, you're going to interview me like I'm any old guest.
Yeah, I've got the book in front of me. I'm about to give it a read. I'm going to have a lot of in-depth questions about some of these hidden Boston gems. I hope you cover things like Fenway Park and okay, all right. Let's.
We're talking. These are like 4 layers deep. Yeah. This is like minutia stories. I can't tell you the research I had to do.
This is deeper,
secret off the beat.
Deeper than the Boston Trilogy. So if you've listened to the Boston Trilogy and you're like, hey, it's missing something, Secret Boston's going to give it to you. I'm super excited and proud 100%. Of you, Kiernan.
Thank you, Ryan.
And we're going to, next episode, we're going to talk about your book. Folks can pick it up. So the book comes out in early August, but is available to pre-order now on Amazon or wherever you get your books. So if you place your order now, you might have it when the episode comes out, so you can follow along. And until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
It's time for a bourbon tasting.
I hope the rain doesn't prevent you from getting out.